Allie. So you may have heard there was a news tsunami yesterday. Within hours of each other, two bombshells involving two men with very close ties to the president. Here to help me break it all down is NBC News legal analyst Dan Goldman, MSNBC national political correspondent Steve Kornacki, and MSNBC legal analyst Katie Phang. Welcome to you all. Thank you so much for being here. So, by any measure, yesterday was not a good day for the White House. A jury in Virginia found the president's former campaign manager, Paul Manafort, guilty of various tax and bank fraud charges, which didn't have anything to do with the president per se. But there was a relation, obviously, between the two men professionally, so it was newsworthy. And then came the real shocker, Michael Cohen, the president's former personal attorney and so-called fixer, referred to as the president's Ray Donovan-type character, pleaded guilty to multiple felonies and testified that the president told him, directed him, to arrange hush money payments to a porn star and a Playboy model just days ahead of the presidential election. What Cohen now admits was a violation of law, election law. I'm going to speak with Cohen's attorney live in a few minutes right here. But first, the latest from NBC's Hallie Jackson.
From confidant to criminal, the president's former fixer flipping on him with new fallout now as the president suggests sympathy for Michael Cohen.
I feel badly for both.
Feeling badly for both, the president says, apparently referring not just to Paul Manafort, but to Cohen, too, the man who walked into Manhattan court and admitted he broke the law because Donald Trump told him to, implicating a sitting president in a serious crime. Cohen's attorney, Lanny Davis.
So there's a cover-up here by our now President of the United States that is undeniable. He directed Michael Cohen to make this payment of $130,000.
Cohen now faces 3.5 to 5 years in prison after pleading guilty to 8 felony charges of tax fraud, bank fraud, and, notably, campaign finance violations. Those include illegal payoffs to keep 2 women quiet about alleged affairs with Donald Trump. Affairs he denies. One of those payments, $130,000 to porn star Stormy Daniels, made 11 days before the 2016 election. The president has insisted he had no idea about the hush money at the time.
Did you know about the $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels? Then why did Michael Cohen make this if there was no truth or allegation?
Well, you have to ask Michael Cohen. Michael's my attorney, and you'll have to ask Michael.
Do you know where he got the money to make that payment?
No, I don't know.
The president's lawyer later acknowledging he paid the money back.
Funneled through law firm, and the president repaid it.
Oh, I didn't know he did.
Yep.
Now, Daniels and her attorney say Cohen's plea deal vindicates them.
The message that I would send to the president of the United States is you better prepare because you're in a lot of trouble.
The president's legal team doesn't think so. Rudy Giuliani tells NBC News there is no allegation of any wrongdoing against the president in the government's charges against Mr. Cohen. It is clear that, as the prosecutor noted, Mr. Cohen's actions reflect a pattern of lies and dishonesty over a significant period of time. But President Trump didn't always think Cohen was a liar in his public comments over the last couple years.
Michael Cohen is a very talented lawyer. He's a good lawyer in my firm.
I always liked Michael. And he's a good person.
Cohen worked for Donald Trump for about a decade, privy to his most sensitive legal and business dealings. And even though the longtime loyalist recently said his family and country come first, he once memorably declared he'd take a bullet for his boss. Now, he's taking a deal instead.
Okay, so can we just start with where Giuliani left it? There's no allegation of wrongdoing in the government's charges against of wrongdoing by the president in the government's charges against Michael Cohen. Well, that may be true in the actual charging document that they didn't say President Trump did anything. But the point is that Michael Cohen pleaded guilty to a federal crime, saying it was directed by. So the person who's now admitted to violating the law is saying the president directed me to do it.
And by the way, when he said that in court, that was completely gratuitous and unnecessary to what the court proceeding was. It is not alleged in the charges against him that the president was involved, and he did not have to say that in order to plead guilty.
Right.
He chose to do it to get that on the record, which is an interesting little wrinkle.
But here's the thing. You didn't see the name Trump necessarily, but my 3-year-old could put it together.
Yeah, you didn't need
it's
to.
Individual one with his presidential campaign, and he is the one who directed Cohen to make the payments.
Yeah.
And that is exactly how Trump is implicated right now.
And Lanny Davis is going to be here in a minute. He represents Michael Cohen, and he's been saying on the news that they submitted, that Giuliani or the president's lawyer submitted a letter to the prosecutors in this case admitting that President Trump had directed this. And I think their position is the Trump campaign, the Trump people is, he directed it, but it wasn't a violation of campaign finance law because the reason they wanted Michael Cohen to pay off these women is because to protect President Trump and his family. Because Cohen said before, in 2006 I would have done this, in 2011 I would have done this. I didn't want Melania to know. The president's family didn't need to know he'd been doing this. That is why I paid off the women. That's why he wanted them paid off. That's not a campaign violation.
So let me ask you this. Why, if that's true, would Michael Cohen lie in order to plead guilty to that exact crime?
Yeah. You tell me.
It doesn't work that way. You don't lie against your self-interest. You lie in your self-interest. So in 2006, before Michael Cohen was under investigation, he had a very different tune. Now that he was under investigation and he was likely to be charged with that crime, he is trying to work himself out of it.
But the court, the government's, their core case against him had to do with money, like tax dealings that were shady with Michael Cohen.
Tax evasion.
That had nothing to do with Trump. And even Paul Manafort, his conviction yesterday, right? You were down there all week.
Yep.
That wasn't about Trump.
Nope.
It was, so other than the 2 counts of campaign finance violations, the payoffs to Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal, all the charges yesterday, all the felonies relate to these 2 guys, bad hombres, as Trump has said, right? That's his favorite term.
He likes Manafort.
Not that, but I'm just saying, those are crimes that have nothing to do with the president. It just shows that these are criminals.
How much do you need?
Yeah, it just shows. I'm not trying to exonerate anybody. I just want to focus in on, because what's interesting here is Trump. We know that he surrounds himself with a bunch of bad guys. We know this. Did we not know this prior to yesterday? I'm just saying, there's been a lot of evidence of that.
And he just tweeted this morning, though, if you want a good lawyer, don't use Michael Cohen.
What a shock.
Cohen was decades working for him, right?
That's helpful, President Trump. Yeah, it says if anybody's looking for a good lawyer, this is from President Trump, I would strongly suggest you don't retain the services of Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen is obviously not going to be in the legal business anymore. But you tell me, because the question people want to know now is President Trump going to get impeached? Is he going to get charged? Does this mean he's a criminal too? That is what's the most interesting part of this. And I practiced law for 10 years. I don't see it. Number one, you can't charge a sitting president with a crime. Number two, impeachment. Can impeachment be brought against somebody for what they did before they got in office? Number three, the Democrats would have to win both houses of Congress in November for them to actively impeach and then convict a president, right? So it's we are a long way away from this getting to the diciest place.
But the question for Steve, I think, is what is going on with the Republicans in Congress? Because I think that's the pressure point that could move the needle a little bit.
Well, we've been through a situation like this before. 20 years ago, at almost exactly this same moment, Bill Clinton was basically implicated in a crime to conceal a politically damaging affair with Monica Lewinsky in 1998. The crime with Bill Clinton was perjury. There were also accusations that he suborned perjury, that he obstructed justice, that he abused power eventually. That became part of the impeachment proceedings. Democrats in 1998, the president's party in 1998, would have defected on the spot, and all year were in danger of defecting from Bill Clinton. But the thing that held them in was the polling never changed for Bill Clinton. The entire year, he was at 60 to 70% in the polls. In fact, every revelation in 1998, Bill Clinton's poll numbers came up because the message the public sent in 1998 was, yes, we believe the president committed perjury. Yes, we believe he committed perjury for the purpose of insulating himself from accusations of a politically damaging affair. But we do not believe that rises to the level of something that should overturn an election and have a president removed from office. That was the judgment of the American people 20 years ago in a very similar moment. Now, I don't know. Donald Trump does not come into this with a 60 to 70% approval rating. He's sitting at 42% right now. You've got a massive opposition that's out there that's been in this country for a year and a half.
But Republicans are terrified of his base.
I think, it's one of those. If there is the other thing that happened in 98, Clinton's party gained seats in the midterm, and that killed all of the momentum for Democrats to ever abandon him.
That's not going to happen.
If Democrats pick up the House, if there's a message in that midterm, a massive shift to Democrats, that Democratic majority that would come in there, I think, would feel emboldened to act on this potential.
But Yeah, I mean, when I said that's not going to happen, I meant the Republicans are not likely to gain gain seats in the House.
It was when that happened in '98. It was such a break from history. It was so shocking. Every Democrat in America said, "Do I have to impeach?" Clinton said, "Absolutely not. The country is sending a clear message here." I don't think you're going to get that kind of message this year, but we'll see.
But Clinton was impeached. He was impeached. He just wasn't found guilty. Because if we're to get impeached, the House has to say you're impeached, and to get found guilty, it goes to the Senate for a trial.
Kicked out of the presidency.
Yeah, to actually be kicked out, and the Senate has to approve. And that's why, if like I know a lot of my Democrat friends are like, "This is it, this is it," and I would submit to you, this is not it. This is not it.
With Watergate,
I'll give you the last word.
Remember with Watergate, the reason why Nixon resigned is that Republican senators went to him and said, "We cannot support you anymore.
There
you need
is
to
zero
resign."
chance of that happening right now, right? Zero chance whatsoever.
We'll see.
Is there anybody
I don't know how many crimes he has to commit.
Jeff Flake will go in there and say, "Now I really mean it." And that's it. Then there'll be no other Republicans behind him except, John McCain. All right, I got to leave it at that. Great discussion. Thank you, panel. Because up next, we're going to be speaking with Michael Cohen's attorney live. Don't go away.
Hello, Today fans. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking that button down there and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives.